Welcome to the UN World Data Forum event, integrating data partnerships, interoperability stories from around the world. In recent years, a host of data partnerships have emerged that bring together National Statistics Office, policymakers, scientists, private sector actors, and many others. These multi-stakeholder partnerships from around the world have been finding solutions to many data interoperability challenges across domains, geographies, and issues. What is data interoperability, you may ask? Well, it's the ability to join up and merge data without losing meaning. In practice, data is said to be interoperable when it can be easily reused and processed in different applications, allowing different information systems to work together. Interoperability is a key enabler for the development sector to become more data-driven. However, teams and organizations are often overloaded with day-to-day operations and have little time left to introduce and adopt standards, technologies, tools, and practices for greater data interoperability. My name is Jameson Crow, Open Data Expert and Project Manager at NGO Open Data Watch, and I'll be moderating an amazing group of presenters who will be showcasing examples of the successful deployment of interoperability solutions from around the world for us. Afterwards, we'll also discuss the newly launched Interoperability Maturity Model, a product of the Collaborative on SDG Data Interoperability, which builds on their Guide to Interoperability, which was launched at the 2018 UN World Data Forum. So without further ado, let me introduce this session's speakers. First up, we'll hear from Dr. Joseph Sitsine, who will be discussing data interoperability in the health sector in Kenya. He's a public health specialist who has worked in the field of epidemiology for more than 18 years. He is currently the head of Department for Health Sector Monitoring at the Ministry of Health in Kenya and in charge of developing a digital health platform to be rolled out in all public health facilities in Kenya. He holds a degree in medicine and has worked as a district medical officer of health, where he launched a national health initiatives and primary health care in a population of more than 1 million people. Due to his passion in public health and management, he trained further and also holds a master's and PhD in public health and a master's in business administration. Thank you for joining us, Doctor. Afterwards, Hannah Reed will discuss data interoperability in the agriculture sector in Ethiopia. Hannah is a program officer on the Agricultural Development Digital Farmer Services team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where she focuses on improving the quality and availability of data and evidence to inform strategy and program implementation. She supports initiatives to improve methods, tools, and technologies which reduce costs, increase accuracy, and improve use of data for decision-making. Hannah has over 9 years of experience in data analytics, monitoring and evaluation, data management, and software implementation in the health and agricultural fields. Her background is in environmental public health and spatial epidemiology. Thanks for joining us, Hannah. Then we'll speak with Julia Solano about interoperability within the field of national statistics in Colombia. Julia is the Technical Director of Regulation at Colombia's National Statistical Office, DANE. She promotes the implementation of standards and good practices in the national statistical system, as well as innovation and perspective and production of statistical information through the work with the Advisory Council of the National Statistical System, known as CASA. Prior to this role, she had worked at DANE in research, design, and implementation of statistical processes to generate inflation statistics, the population census, among others. She also has experience in the execution of innovation projects related with statistical methodology and incorporation of new data sources and data integration. She holds a master's in economics from National University and a BS in economics and international business. Good to have you here, Juliet. Then we're going to be moving away from country-specific examples and talk about data interoperability within the UN system in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals with Nayara Costa. Nayara is an international relations analyst serving since 2018 as Senior Sustainable Development Officer at the Division for Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, where she coordinates the Stakeholder Engagement Program. Before that, she led the International Secretariat of Together 2030, a civil society network tracking the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. She was the advocacy director of Beyond 2015, a global civil society campaign, and actively engaged in the 2030 Agenda intergovernmental process. Nayara holds a master's degree in international relations from the University of Brasilia and MBA from Getúlio Vargas Foundation. Welcome, Nayara. Then we're going to shift gears. Tom Orrell will introduce a new interoperability maturity model. Tom is an advocate and non-practicing barrister. He founded Data Ready in 2018, having identified a need for less technical and more governance-oriented services in sustainable development and humanitarian sectors. Tom's expertise lies in the links between digital and data policy, sustainable development, and human rights. Since 2017, Tom has coordinated the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development, Data's interoperability work, convening the collaborative on SDG Data Interoperability alongside Luis Gonzalez Morales at the UN Statistics Division. Tom has over 14 years of experience working for UN agencies in Ethiopia and Togo, tech-oriented civil society and social purpose companies, and London law-based firms specializing in human rights law. Tom has a BA in International Relations from Keele University and was called to the Bar of England and Wales in 2011. Then we're going to discuss some questions with our panelists before hearing concluding remarks from Luis Gonzalez Morales, who is the Chief of Web Development Data Visualization section of the United Nations Statistics Division, where he co-leads initiatives in data interoperability, open data, semantic web technologies, and integration of geospatial information and statistics for the Sustainable Development Goals. Since joining the UN Statistics Division in 2005, Luis has worked with the national statistical offices and international partners on methodology and capacity development projects in the fields of economic statistics, data quality, development indicators, and the coordination of national statistical activities for the SDGs. So thank you all for joining us, and let's go ahead and begin with your presentations. Dr. Jofis Sitane, let's go ahead and begin with you. As a reminder, you'll have 5 minutes to present, and when you have 1 minute left, I will hold up a sign to let you know. Doctor, you're muted, so go ahead and unmute yourself before you begin.
Allow me to share my screen. Okay, quickly, so that in the interest of time, I'm going to talk about the Kenyan experience in interoperability within the Kenyan health sector. The main problem that we have in Kenya relates to mainly on data collection, how we report, how we store our data, how we retrieve the data, and how we use the data. Kenya currently has a lot of challenges in the sense that most of the work is paper-based, as you can see in that picture. We lack clear strategies. There is a big challenge when it comes to governance. We have a weak governance structure. There are no clear guidelines on who is responsible to do what. Ours is a data-led, not action-led. So we collect data for the sake of collecting data. We focus on collecting and reporting data and not using the data for decision-making. The quality of data obviously becomes incomplete. Standards are low. But more importantly, for the purpose of this, we have disparate databases. This is because most of the data that is collected is heavily partner supported, and therefore each partner who focuses on a particular area of disease control will look at the systems that will collect that particular data, leaving out the rest. And in this slide, you can see that we have so many different types of systems which are already existing in different health facilities. But most critical is that in one health facility, we have more than 12. And each of these facilities, each of these health information systems are not communicating to the other one. There is no interoperability standards that are linking them. So a health facility will have different types of data collection systems, but each of those systems are vertical and report to the needs of the person who set up that. We do have, therefore, consequently, because of the partner-led initiatives, several types of systems which are already in place but are no longer in use. But of course, in the recent past, the Kenyan environment has shifted. And we have a very good policy environment for the digital health and for making sure that data is interoperable, the databases are interoperable, and that we can be able to use the data for purposes of making informed decisions. The Kenyan Constitution, which was passed in 2010, has given clearly a right to information. We do have the Vision 2030 that identifies information as important in development. We have laws that are already in place, the Health Act 2017, which has made it mandatory for all health facilities to report. We do have, for purposes of protection of the data, a Data Protection Act, again, which looks at data security. We do have the policy documents that have been developed by the Ministry of Health, specifically the National E-Health Policy and Strategy. We do have in place the e-health strategy, which starts from 2019 and we started last year and continues to 2024. We also have the certification framework in place. We do have interoperability framework, which was still under development, but was signed last week. And we are now working on e-health bill to make sure that everything works very well. But as a matter of commitment, the government is demonstrating a firm commitment by making sure that all key areas that will relate to data, from generation to transmission to storage, all departments are enabled to ensure that data is collected. For example, the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology has been mandated to link all public health facilities to the National Fiber Project. And already we are targeting more than 120 facilities in the current financial year. This is already ongoing. We have, in the same breath, the Ministry of Information, again, making sure that these health facilities have the local area network fixed. We have the Ministry of Energy, making sure that all the health facilities in Kenya have power, and that not just having power within the facility, but wiring within the facility is also done. And to spearhead this, the Ministry of Health is consolidating all the data that is stored in multiple sites by procuring the necessary state-of-the-art equipment to create a national data center where all data will be domiciled, and then the development of an end-to-end digital health platform that will be used to collect data from the health facilities. And in brief, this is what we want to roll out, that the system will be able to provide interoperability at all levels. And you can see interoperability and integration interface here. Because this digital health platform will be covering all health facilities from level 1 to level 6, you recognize that in different areas will now be able to interlink through this national architecture that will be able to enable communication from one different type of system to a different type of system to make sure that all the data is collected and used appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for that presentation. Hopefully we'll have lots of good questions for you to tell us a little bit more about it in the question and answer session of the panel today. Next, we'll be hearing from Hannah Reed, who will be talking about her project in Ethiopia.
Thanks, Jameson, and happy to be here with everybody today. Today, I'd like to share a story of interoperability from the livestock sector in Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, they have the largest livestock population in Africa, which the sector is increasingly recognized as having significant potential to contribute to and drive economic development and improved human nutrition through increased productivity of animals, boosting export-oriented businesses, and generating foreign currency. And while the livestock sector holds this significant opportunity, a lack of reliable, timely, and quality data and analytics really hinders the government's ability to effectively and efficiently plan and deliver services, manage sectoral resources, formulate policy and investment plans, and make timely decisions. Some of the major constraints that have been identified by the government include limited availability of core data, and that could be because either the data just don't exist or because of insufficient geographical coverage or completeness. This leads to highly variable data quality in terms of timeliness, completeness, comparability, and accuracy of the data sets. And the databases that do exist are highly fragmented for many of the same reasons we just heard about. They're often designed for very specific purposes, whether that's disease monitoring or genetic improvement or monitoring and evaluation. And many of them were actually designed by non-governmental groups for very specific projects and then transitioned over to the ministry. And this fragmentation and shortage of standards and guidelines makes it very difficult to integrate the data coming from these different systems. And the lack of interoperability and limits the availability and accessibility and use of those data, really resulting in incomplete analyses. And additionally, there are really unclear roles and responsibilities regarding collection, storage, processing, and dissemination, which further complicates things. So this opportunity was really brought to us by the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Resources in Ethiopia, as they really identified these core constraints. And we formed a partnership between the ministry, BMGF, and Livestock Improvement Corporation, which is a farmer-owned cooperative in New Zealand that has decades of experience designing fit-for-purpose livestock information systems to support producers, industry partners, and policymakers to better leverage data to inform decision-making. So the goal of this program is to enhance the availability, quality, accessibility, and use of data for evidence-based policy formulation, review, planning, service delivery, and monitoring of the livestock sector. And this program is called Project Alive, which stands for a Livestock Information Vision for Ethiopia. And we're really hoping to achieve this vision through improved collection and use of data, decreased fragmentation of the systems, and development of a national information system and architecture alongside the human capacity and training components. And this is an ambitious vision, and we're very much still at the beginning of the journey, which started about a year and a half ago. The aim of this first phase is to develop a strategy and technical roadmap for the information system, which will include the technical components as well as the governance aspects that are needed for the system. And in the first phase, we're really focused on getting a clear picture of the landscape. So looking at the existing databases, developing the user stories, thinking through the requirements, proof of concepts, and engaging stakeholders, along with developing the governance structures. And as we've been going through this process, I found the tools such as the Practitioner's Guide to Interoperability, which was launched at the UN Data Forum in 2018, and this new maturity model to be really great assets to help us think through the different components we need to consider, from leadership and ethics to the digital infrastructure. And the frameworks really provide a very concrete way for us to be thinking about how do we make data discoverable, how do we enhance the usage, how do we improve metadata, and considering responsible management of the systems. As we've gone through this process, we've really been thinking about key learnings around designing for context, whether cloud-based systems make sense, applying these tools and best practices, bringing partners along to establish standards together and data sharing agreements so that they can be used by all, and demonstrating the benefits of what interoperability can really achieve, while cultivating champions within the ministry and within the sector, and learning from others such as the health sector, where they've already started this process of designing a health information system. And I look forward to learning more. Thank you.
Great, thanks Hannah so much. Next, we'll hear from Julia Solano from DANE. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. My name is Juliet Solano. I'm the Technical Director of the National Statistical Office, DANE in Colombia. I hope to tell you the story of the recent boosters of interoperability at the national statistical level. I will start the story with the system principles and the approach. I would like to mention that Colombia has a decentralized statistical system. This implies that the system is confirmed by almost 118 entities that produce statistical information or have administrative records. DANE is the statistical authority of the system and has set some objectives for the system. Besides the production and dissemination of official statistics, it includes also the optimization of the use of administrative records and the incorporation of the intersectional approach to the analysis of the statistical information. Also, the importance of having a territorial granularity of data. So the principles of the system are quality, ensuring quality in all the statistical process of generating indicators and information, coherence, ensuring that the several indicators that are being produced for a specific thematic are telling the same story, coordination, of course, in terms of the entities, efficiency in the use of the resources, opportunity, and the delivery of the data, relevance, of the pertinence data, and the data that is needed at a moment, and transparency. All these principles are related or are intent to promote interoperability between all the entities that conform the system. This legal framework is being established through law and also has a decree that establishes how the system works, how we are promoting interchange of data between entities, ensuring ethics management of data, ensuring security and confidentiality of those data. And also sets coordination instances in order to improve the articulation of the members of the system. The second important idea for interoperability is the data ecosystem idea. This is an idea we have learned from international reference as Paris 21. The data ecosystem in Colombia centers as statistical information. Around statistical information, we have several actors in both sides, production and users. In the side of production, we have the national level confirmed by the central bank, the statistical office, DANE, control bodies, private sector, civil society, because we want to recognize that these actors are also key in order to produce information for the system. So the system also has departmental and municipal levels confirmed by majors' offices, private sector at this level, civil society important at this level, and the last part of the system are the data users, the ones that had needs and demands that need to be satisfied by the ecosystem. So this is a second important idea because allow us to recognize the actors, the important role the actors are playing, not only in the production and the interoperability of those data, but also in terms of the users and satisfying the demands of the several actors that conform the system. It also allows to see the importance of generating capacities to improve how the system works. So finally, the projects in which we materialize the legal framework, the data ecosystem and scheme of work, we will have these 4 projects I want to tell you about. The first one is about interoperability of economic statistics with OECD. We have been interchanging indicators with the OECD several years ago. We learned a lot from that experience. We use the standard SDMX for that interoperability. Right now, since 2000, the last year, we start to implement these standards in other topics as the SDGs. We are working not only with areas at the statistical office, but with 17 entities of the National Statistical System in order to ensure the implementation of standards of the SDMX in the interchange of data. So this is important because it's a next step in our experience. So, and implies the challenging work with other entities of the system. Other example is the Orange Economic Information System, in which we want to collect and disseminate indicators for the created economy with the participation of several entities of the National Statistical System. And finally, the bigger step we want to give is to have a federated viewer based on SDMX standard, so we can collect data and visualize those data. That is like the main key importance of the system to allow access to the all data of the system. So I would like to finish with the main challenge and lessons learned from our experience in those projects. And is you need a strong legal framework. You also need a scheme of work with entities to overcome the challenges. We also know about interoperability, but you need to have projects when you are also able to see how the legal framework and the different scheme of works are going to be implemented in order to accomplish and satisfy specific needs related that with SDGs or with a creative economy or with a circular economy or other important demands that the national system has. I would like to finish with these 3 key ideas of our experience. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julia. And now our last presenter on these projects will be Nayara Costa, talking about the UN system and Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you very much, Jamison and all colleagues. So first, I want to thank the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and also our sister division, the UN Stats division, for this invitation. And I want to salute all the participants of the UN World Data Forum that are following this discussion. I will be sharing an experience today called Linked SDGs. And this is an outcome of a very broad collaboration between several divisions within DESA, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations, and others in the UN, including the UN Library. And I have to say where this started. And this started based on a few challenges, and the fact that the availability and access to high-level quality, timely, disaggregated, and reliable data is fundamental for the 2030 agenda. We also realized that it was not only a challenge of filling the gaps, but also to integrate and make the massive amount of data related to SDGs that we have and the information that is there accessible to decision makers and also in a meaningful way. I work as part of the stakeholder engagement program. So for us, it was also important to bring data produced by stakeholders. This is something that we keep working on, how to make citizen-generated data more available, visible, and useful for decision makers. And also on the other hand, and how to make all data that is there available on SDGs helpful and useful for stakeholders beyond national governments, but also including national governments. So Linked SDGs was developed through the support of a grant we have with the European Commission. This is a tool. It's we think this is a foundation for standard-based data exchange, and also to build a common framework and guidelines to improve the visibility, interoperability, and usability of citizen science data on SDGs. The linked SDGs, which I'll be showing very soon, the backbone or what is behind is the SDG taxonomy, which is a system of unique identifiers for the SDGs linked to the UN Bibliographic Information System, the UNBIS, and other key vocabularies. And this is also available online. I'm showing this on the screen, the link to the metadata. And this web-based mechanism, it allows us to see SDG-related data and information assets accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this is enabling the development of applications, such as the one that I'll be showing soon, and integrating authoritative data, concepts, and definitions for a large number of formerly unknown sources. So just showing to you, this is linked SDGs. So developed under the leadership of the UNSD division and Division for Sustainable Development Goals. This is a pilot application. So this is something that we are putting out there, we are showing, we are testing, we are improving every day. But the idea is that an application that discovers the semantic links between text documents, relevant SDG entities, and statistical data. The tool allows for automatically connecting SDG-related information resources, and it uses linked open data techniques. And then showcases the usefulness of adopting semantic web technologies and linked open data principles for extracting SDG-related metadata from documents and establishing the connections amongst the various SDGs. So how it works, this is just a visualization. You can use a document, and I keep saying sometimes that when you work on the SDGs, we have so many reports, so many documents, and those are, yeah, I can, thank you, James. And sometimes you cannot read through them very quickly. So on linked SDGs, you upload a document in different formats, and the tool will be extracting the concepts related to the SDGs. So it will be using the SDG taxonomy, Eurovoc, and other databases. And then it also extracts the geographical areas. So from a different document, you may go down and drill down to the regions that it's referring to. Also, you will be seeing in that document which SDGs are being reflected and how, and you can also access the UN databases related to that region, related to those SDGs. And at the same time, it's also available in different languages. All the 6 UN languages, it reads through the documents, and it's developer friendly. So it's open to all those who are interested and want to use the tool. There is a lot to be done in terms of moving forward. As I said, this is the first, it's a pilot tool. We are showing, we are learning, we are improving the usability. I am on the user side of that tool, so I keep asking for more updates and things to be included. But there is very much to do. So including, we need to promote more open source projects with multi-stakeholder contributions, integrating linked open data infrastructure with traditional analytic and AI capabilities. We need to provide public concept extraction and SDG tagging services, and using common vocabularies to semantically link data and information across national and global data systems, and also develop new use cases within the UN system as part of the SG, the Secretary General's data strategy. And this is something that linked SDG has been triggering, and I'll be happy to chat more during the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nayar, and thank you to our other presenters. Just as a summary, we just heard about a few ongoing and completed projects to increase data interoperability in Kenya, Ethiopia, Colombia, as well at the global level. Despite you all working with data from very different sectors, agricultural, health, statistics, sounds like many of the challenges that you face were really similar. So in the question and answer portion of this event, I hope we'll hear more about those challenges, as well as some of the anticipated and unexpected benefits you all experienced. But before we go into that, we're going to hear from Tom Aurel about the interoperability maturity model that was just recently developed as an initiative of the Collaborative on SDG Data Interoperability.
Thank you, Jameson, and thank you very much to all the previous speakers for those really interesting presentations. And I look forward as well to the Q&A session where we can dig a little deeper into the issues and opportunities of that work. I'm really excited to be able to finally present some of the work that the collaborative on SDG Data Interoperability has been working on for the past year or so, together with my colleague Luis Gonzalez Morales, who's on this call as well. We've been working frantically with a number of key stakeholders within the collaborative and also the broader collaborative to put together a data maturity assessment tool for the for interoperability, which we hope will be of use to, well, the speakers on this event and also many others. So before we go into the discussion component of this session, I wanted to spend a few minutes just introducing the tools that we've been working on and the maturity assessment in particular. So I'm just going to spend a couple of moments running through three areas: the rationale and objectives of the tool, the development and structure of it, and finally its content and anticipated use. So without further ado, when we launched the guide to interoperability, the practitioner's guide, which Hannah mentioned in her presentation at the 2018 World Data Forum, we got a lot of positive feedback, and especially around the 5 pillars of interoperability, which we identified, which form the chapter headings for each chapter within the guide, and also the 4 layers of interoperability, which I'll talk about in a moment: the organizational, human, data, and technological. However, even as we were publishing and launching the guide, we knew that there was always a bit of a gap between the contents of the guide and actually implementing policies within organizations such as national statistics offices or big UN departments or ministries of health or other line ministries. So after a series of consultations with the collaborative and a number of different experts from across the sustainable development community as well, including parts of the UN, the OECD, World Bank, and a number of non-governmental organizations, including Open Data Watch, I must say, we settled on the development of a joined up data maturity assessment, which is what we're calling the maturity model that we've produced. And the proposed utility and objective of the document is to develop something that can be used as a supplement to the use of more generic data governance maturity models and other strategic planning tools. This is very much something which we hope will be used at a strategic level to help with planning. And we wanted to produce something, if I may say, that can interoperate with other strategic planning tools, but provide some real specificity and detail on the nuances of interoperability components. And the audience for this is very much the manager and director level representation of national statistics offices, government line ministries and departments, multilateral agencies and large NGOs. Just to be really clear about that, the objective of this document is to really help within that strategic planning process, and that's the level at which this has been pitched. In terms of the development and the structure of the model, keeping in mind what I just said about us wanting to ensure that this was an interoperable tool and not too prescriptive, as a first step, late last year and earlier this year, we started to review some of the more common maturity models which are used within our sector. There's IBM's information governance model, the Gartner maturity model, Data Orchard have a model, or CARE International's responsible data model, including several of others. And this mapping exercise initially was really helpful in identifying how we could structure our own module on interoperability that could be used alongside these governance models and many others. These maturity models, I beg your pardon, and many others. So after several rounds of iteration and with support from our advisory group and the collaborative, we settled on the formula that we now use. And you can see the structure and the matrix of the model on the slide. And on the horizontal axis, we've identified 5 stages of maturity that largely correspond to the stages utilized in a number of the major maturity models out there. They progress sequentially, starting at undefined, progressing through emerging, learning, building, and finally consolidating, each building on the level before it. And along the vertical axis, we've utilized the 4 layers of interoperability that we use in the guide, organizational, human, data, and technological. And we've subdivided these into a total of 19 dimensions, which together make up the structure of the maturity assessment. And it's our hope that having structured the model in this way, we can do two things. On the one hand, provide a level of richness and detail, which will be genuinely useful for strategic planning processes, while on the other hand, maintaining a simple and easily usable matrix grid structure, which is easy to navigate. As we develop the content for the model, and I haven't shown the actual content of the model in this presentation because it's about 15 pages long in total, and there just isn't enough time for us to go through that in detail. But as we develop the content, we quickly realized that you can't talk about interoperability in isolation from other data management functions. And we've heard from all of our presenters today about the need for a strong legal and policy framework, the need to have operational strategies at hand, the need to have specific technologies and technological infrastructure present as well. All of these are crucial to interoperability. So even when developing a narrow tool such as this, which is focused ostensibly at just interoperability, it's still crucial to talk about broader issues that relate to data governance generally, like setting strategic objectives, leadership and management, oversight and accountability. Interoperability isn't just the technical ability to join up data, but it's the ability to do that while conveying meaning. And that conveying meaning part is quite a difficult part to get right, because it's not just semantic meaning, but it means utility as well. So keeping that in mind, Luis and I pulled together these 19 dimensions, which I showed on the previous slide, and put them together. And we think that it's actually quite a robust categorization of data governance issues that go beyond data interoperability. And while there is some overlap between some of the areas, which is inevitable, we're confident in how we've classified things overall. Each row, as I've mentioned, of the maturity model currently builds sequentially on the row before it. And in general terms, the content is quite formulaic as well. We've tried to keep it as simple as possible, with the language used throughout the model being very straightforward. Unaware will always mean just that an entity isn't yet aware of the need to organize certain functions in a way which support interoperability. But, and also consolidating the highest part of the maturity model will always mean that an organization is not just looking at what it's doing now or what it's done in the past, but is also forward thinking and leading in the community and data ecosystem more broadly. And from the feedback we've received today, we're getting quite positive reviews about the structure and the usefulness of the model and its utility in undertaking strategic review processes. So we're very much looking forward to the feedback, both from the panelists in this event, but also from the community of practitioners at the World Data Forum more broadly. Just a couple of final points. It's important to note that the model is designed to be used flexibly. Some national statistics offices or government line ministries, such as the Ministry of Health in Kenya, may find that they're consolidating in some areas, but are completely unaware of other areas. And that's fine. Being able to consolidate your activities in one area doesn't preclude the fact that progress can still be made in other areas. And it also reflects the duality of functions for this tool. On the one hand, we hope it can help to set strategic objectives around interoperability and feed into those strategic processes. But on the other hand, that it can also be used as an assessment tool to determine where an organization or entity sits on the spectrum between unaware and consolidating on specific issues. The other thing to note is that we've designed the tool so that entities can decide what they want to measure and what they don't want to measure. If cybersecurity and access to digital infrastructure are not issues for a particular organization, for instance, they can simply ignore those rows in the model and focus on areas that are priorities. That might be data ethics, or it might be metadata modeling, or whatever the case may be. We just wanted to make sure that the tool covers as many bases as possible, but there's no obligation from a user point of view to incorporate all the dimensions in the work and the way in which that they use the tool. It's also important, I think, at this stage, just to note how this tool relates to the other documents that the collaborative has produced. There are three of those. There's the introductory brief to interoperability and the guide to interoperability, and also now a guidance document which accompanies this maturity model. And the brief and the guide, which are available on the GPSDD website, provide a lot of intellectual backgrounds to a lot of this work and consolidate a lot of the knowledge of the collaborative on SDG data interoperability, but they don't provide anything as specific as this tool. The guidance document that we've produced to accompany this tool explains each of those 19 dimensions that I've mentioned, and provides examples of what they mean and links to further resources around each one. So it's far more of an operational tool, and that will be made available to UN World Data Forum constituents as well, and we'd appreciate your feedback on them. Just as a final point, these are living documents, and we anticipate that in future they will be updated and that they will be refined. And that's another reason why we're really looking forward to getting some feedback on this call now from our panelists, but also from the broader community of practice as well. So thank you very much, and I hand back to Jameson.
Thanks very much, Tom, and congratulations to you and the collaborative team on this tremendous tool. I'm sure many of our panelists will have some questions about how that can be used a little bit later. But before we go into that, we're going to start our question and answer portion of the session. I'll ask everyone to turn on their cameras for this. And we'll go ahead and we'll just start with a question for everyone. What would you say, in your experience of your project, 1 to 2 dimensions of interoperability that contributed to your project success, or for those ongoing projects that you expect to contribute largely to the success of your project? In terms of the order of people speak, go ahead and unmute yourself, raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and proceed as such. Would anyone like to start us off?
I can jump in. I think that just reflecting on Tom's presentation too, our project in Ethiopia really started as a data challenge. That was our starting point, was thinking about data interoperability. And quickly though, and I think that that's going to be a really key dimension for us to look at, but we've quickly realized how important the other layers, so specifically the organizational and institutional layers, dimensions of interoperability, because you could have a system, a technical system and databases that have common standards, but without the organizational support and the leadership, those data might still not be usable. So I think these tools have really helped, at least for me, kind of increasing awareness of the other dimensions and the other layers that need to be developed hand in hand for the whole system to work.
Thanks, Hannah, for that. Would anyone else like to jump in?
Hello, everyone. I would like to jump because I agreed with the points of Hannah. I think one of the main issues here is the organizational level. So I think in the case of the National Statistical Office, it has been very important to have setting specific objectives, have the support and the leadership of the management of the statistical office and their involved, and also the legal framework, a clear legal framework that enables the statistical office to contact and work with the entities in order to convince them that we must overcome the challenges, the technical challenges, the technological challenges and restrictions to interoperate in order to ensure the purpose of the national statistical system. So first of all, I think organizational component is very important, and data integration, because at the end, we also work with data and need to have concepts, classifications, and standards in order to integrate those. So I think all the dimensions are important, but in our projects, we are very dynamic with the organizational component and with the data integration component. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet.
May I?
Thank you. Looks like you are not seeing the hands which are raised, or I don't know, maybe you are unable to see, because some of us have been raising our hands for some time. But from the Kenyan experience, apart from what my colleagues have said, which is very critical, I think the other very important issue is the demand for data for decision making. When the leadership decides that they need some information which is lacking, that creates a vacuum that pushes the leadership to start to create the necessary governance structures, and also to make sure that the data is collected and synthesized in a manner that leadership can be able to use it, and also the technical people can be able to use it for making decisions. So this has become very critical in a country like Kenya, when previously that demand was not there, but suddenly the demand has come because of what has been demonstrated by the little data that has previously been collected. And that has generated a lot of interest, both from the public and also from the bureaucrats. Over to you.
Thank you, Doctor. Nara, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jameson. And yeah, I also was reflecting, listening to Ton. In our case, I think there's the dimension of the organizational dimension was very critical. So it showed to us the importance of having the financial, the human resources, or the capacity of working within the organization. This was very, very critical. I think there's a very human dimension in our initiative because it really demanded a very different capacities for collaboration, and sometimes capacities that they're so different that, but still it worked. And I think also the data dimension and having the metadata, having the SDG taxonomy, this was what allowed the application to be set up and to make the reading that we see that I've shown you before.
Thanks very much, everyone, for their perspective. It sounds like, you know, when we think of data interoperability, often what we think of is all these very technical aspects, and really some of the challenges and some of the more important aspects of your projects have to do with these data governance issues, organizational issues that maybe some people don't think about when they think of data interoperability. So I think it's really great that you all brought that up. I have a couple questions for individuals, maybe that you can elaborate from your presentation. I'd like to start with Dr. Sitane. You really emphasize a lot about the importance of the policy framework in place to your project. I thought maybe you can speak a little bit more about why that wasn't so important, and if your project or your ongoing work influenced the policy landscape, or if that was largely set up prior to your project beginning.
Thank you for that question, because to me, it's a very critical question, because we've been grappling with one main question that we have not been able to answer effectively. And I think looking forward, we should be able to unpackage ourselves to a level where we can answer that. Who is the owner of health data? Is it the patient, or is it the facility that has collected the data? I think it's clearly obvious that it should be the patient who owns the data. But unfortunately, the patient cannot walk home with their data. The data remains in the health facility. And this is what has now generated a new dimension of discussions. And without the proper policy guidelines on which type of data to be collected by who, how do you deal with the data when it comes to sharing that data? Do you need the consent of the person? And eventually, that is why we had, as a country, to come up with two main things, laws. One is the Health Act, which was passed in 2017, which now makes it mandatory for all health facilities to report. This is because of the recognition that if we don't collect all the data, then we are not going to make adequate decisions. We needed basically a certain level of data which meets a particular quality. And number two, that data should be well protected for use with the fact that the original owners are de-identified. And that is where now the Data Protection Act came on board. And these two have been really the guiding principles. Of course, based on that, now we develop the other policies that are guiding the whole sector in terms of interoperability, the standards, but all of them are pegged into these laws. But the main question that has been there is who owns the data and how should that data be stored in a safe and secure manner, and who should have the access to this data. Over to you.
Thank you. I see a lot of head nodding from our panelists. I wanted to give the opportunity to anyone else who wanted to jump in, talk about any legal policy frameworks or general data governance issues that were a core part of their project as well.
If I may just jump in momentarily and just respond to a couple of things which have been said, because it's actually really useful feedback. And Dr. Sitiene, you've made a couple of points in particular which really strike me. So the first is what you mentioned before about the demand for data and how the demand for data from policymakers and decision makers is actually a prerequisite to all of what we're talking about. And I think that that's a really important point that I need to keep in mind. And then the second point that you were just making there is, you know, this highlights, although there are lots of common components across different types of data sources, this highlights some of the nuances of health data in particular, and highlights that while some things can be standardized around interoperability, certain components will be far more important in certain sectors. And that idea of ownership around health data is hugely important, but it's probably less important maybe when thinking about livestock. I don't know, perhaps it is, but you know, different components come up in different ways is the point I'm trying to make there. So thank you very much, because that's good food for thought.
Thanks, Tom.
I would like to mention on that matter that it's a good point. It's different depending on the data and the level of disaggregation of those data. We are using mostly the SDMX standard to interchange indicators, that those are aggregated data. So the challenges are different when we are trying to implement interoperability schemes and microdata. And in the integration of those data, we need to ensure security, confidentiality, ethic use of those data in this scenario. But in the scenario we are working right now with the standard, there are other challenges regarding the systems, the different systems entities has to produce those indicators. So I think that is a very good point. The challenges are different. It depends of the data, and it depends of the unit of observation of those data. Is an enterprise, is a person, is a sensitive data related or privacy data of that person. So those are good points that have to be taken into account when we are going to design and implement interoperability projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Would anyone else like to share before we move on to another question?
Just building on that, a lot of the points really resonated. And something that we've been thinking a lot about is permissions, thinking about data security and permissions depending on the level of aggregation. And even when thinking about sharing across different subsectors or even within line ministries. So when is the person level or animal level data being made available, and when is it the aggregate information? And thinking about different users as well. So how is aggregate information being published and shared, and protecting the more disaggregated data? So just, I think, all really good points.
Great, thank you, Hannah. One thing that you actually mentioned in your presentation, Hannah, was this emphasis on lesson learning and taking lessons and building from those and implementing them into the project as you were going forward. Can you talk a little bit maybe about some of the lessons that you learned that you were either able to implement in this project or learned from going forward for future projects? And maybe other people can jump in and talk about some of the lessons that they learned along the way as well.
Sure. I think, you know, building again on one of the points from before was that this project really initiated from a demand and request from the government for support with bringing together some of these disparate data sets. And I think that that was really critical. And again, something that we learned from other initiatives. So we have I've been supporting a similar initiative in Odisha in India. And really, it needs to be driven by and owned by the entity that will be kind of managing this longer term. And so not going in a priori with any ideas about what that system should look like, but it really needs to be designed for the users and to meet the demands of those users and that individual and the context. As I mentioned, the Ministry of Health in Ethiopia has really been working on a similar initiative to Kenya, actually, for the last 5 years or so. And that has really laid the foundation for establishing some of the data policies in the country that we can then leverage, looking at the ability to use different infrastructure, digital infrastructure, setting the foundation for some of the data sharing agreements that we've been able to leverage. And these, I think, learning from other sectors and learning from, you know, exemplars in other countries as well have really helped us. And specifically, you know, one of the things that we've been on a technical side is really learning from the New Zealand experience, where they have designed some systems on the technical side, understanding what standards have been developed for the livestock sector and applying those and kind of designing them fit for purpose for adapting to Ethiopia.
Thank you, Hannah. Would anyone else like to share some of the lessons that they've learned from their projects? Naira, go ahead.
Thanks so much, James. So I think when we engage in this type of project, and I think Hannah was mentioning something similar, is that you have an issue, you start, but you should not be really definitive about what you can get. And I think this happened to us. We wanted to see the different pieces together, but we didn't have a very clear picture of what we would actually get as a final result. And actually, we were open enough to know that we were just starting and that we were opening up, and that's why it's all open in linked SDGs is all open for others to come up and improve and help us in doing that. So I think there is this sense of risk and engaging in some risk that was very key for us. And I have to say that being able to have an extra budgetary fund that supported us was very critical, even to tap into the specific capacity that we needed. And we found in developing the project, and we had to have a consultant, how it was a very challenging to find this type of capacity as well. So perhaps this is something that we will need to build more, is the capacity in interoperability as well.
Thank you, Naira. Juliet, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to mention that the topic of capacities is very important. When we start at DANI around 2013 to use standards to interoperate indicators, we didn't know about it. We have to learn about to use the standard. We have to have generate the capacities in terms of infrastructure, human skills to manage that and to start to interoperate with the OECD, because it was a requirement, an admission requirement for us. So, but now we are implementing and increasing those capacities to teach other entities and other actors how to interoperate and how to manage those standards. So it's an interesting process because it's incremental. You can hope to have all the capacities and resolve all the challenges right now. It's important to start with projects because you start to implement ideas to generate capacities and you can build on that. Right now, we have engineers developing under the standard because it's open software. So we can build not only the component to interoperate, but the component to visualization component in order to have other services or products that are interesting for the system. So I think capacities is a main issue because it determines how the scope of interoperability initiatives. Thank you.
Yep, Dr. Sitsune, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this issue of human resource is definitely, in terms of capacity, very important. But I would like to look at it in terms of the interest by the different players, because different people collect data for different interests. And they may be using different systems that may be vertical in nature, that we can have, for example, in Kenya, we have several different vertical programs that collect data to specifically meet their own needs. So I think one of the lessons that we've come to learn is that there should be a uniform understanding between the different players so that all of them see the need for interoperability and, more importantly, to use the data for the better good, the use of the metadata to aggregate it in such a manner that it can be used for decision making, not just for that particular program, but for the bigger good that cuts across different programs, both horizontally and vertically. So the issue of bringing together the different players to understand the need and to accept through some mechanism that yes, we need to work together. And that is why in Kenya we came up with these policy guidelines, so that all of us can be able to say, yes, this is the direction we want to go, and this is how we want to do it. With that, in the absence of that, then we still find that there will be a lot of challenges, even bringing together the different players to accept to do one thing.
Thank you, Doctor. We do have to wrap things up, unfortunately. So I think we'll just have everyone go around and talk about what they hope for the future of their project or other projects and going forward. And if you have any questions, brief questions or comments for Tom about the interoperability maturity model, you can go ahead and do that as well. So we'll give everyone just 1 minute to summarize, and then we will move back to Luis for some final comments. Juliet, would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you. So in the next steps, as I was mentioning, we are using interoperability for indicators, but the demands are strong right now to increase the scope to microdata. So the challenges and the capacities we need for that is going to be different. So we are working together with the Ministry of ICT, who is in charge of determining the platforms to interoperate at the government level. So are we working very close with them in order to understand how it works interoperability in a statistical world and taking that into account in the solutions they are implementing for the management of data for the government entities. So I think organizational components is going to be very active for the next months, and also data integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah, would you like to go next?
Sure, thanks. We're in the middle of, the team is in the middle of building out one of the prototypes and actually starting to pull together the data from multiple databases and demonstrating, what's possible when we start bringing that together and visualizing and putting together some of the analytics. So that's pretty exciting, and we're hoping to have the technical roadmap built by early next year, with then plans of thinking about implementation. And I'm very excited to share the new maturity matrix with the team. I think that it'll be really useful from a diagnostic perspective. So looking at those different dimensions, making sure that as we're developing the strategic plan with our partners, that we're addressing each of those different areas. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Hannah. Nayar, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think in our case, I see two ways. One is working more on the application that we have and improving and finding new user abilities and giving also concrete examples of to support outreach on the tool. This is one. And then there is a second one that probably Luis will be able to talk about, is how the linked SDGs, it triggered a very intense conversation within the UN. And then we have been approached regularly by colleagues facing similar challenges. So there is a very good field to explore in terms of internal collaboration and exchange within the UN as well. So yeah, exciting things to come. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nayar. Dr. Sultaneh, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you very much. For us in Kenya, we are extremely excited at this time. For the first time in the history of our country, we are really committed towards data. And it is our hope that this political commitment is not only demonstrated through proper leadership, but also availing the required resources, particularly the required money. And in addition to that, I think one other thing that I think as a country we need to really focus on and to agree is the national architecture and the type of infrastructure that we need to roll out to answer the questions that we need. So for us, we are looking forward to a very exciting and bright future. But above all, even as we think about interoperability, I think we are talking about, thinking about a high-level interface. The data generation is extremely important. And I think it is time also that we have to start to think about the quality of the data that we are collecting that eventually will be linked up at a later stage, up the ladder or up the chain. And that is what we are hoping, that our policies now can be able to guide up to that particular level. Thank you very much, and wish you a lovely morning or evening. Thank you, bye.
Thank you, Doctor. And I love that we all had very hopeful words about the next steps in these projects. So that's really exciting to hear. Tom, I know we didn't get to talk too much about the maturity model, but if you wanted to say a few words before we pass it on to Luis to close the session, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank everyone again for taking the time. It's been really helpful to get the insights and the view from practitioners around the world working on very different problems, but all centered around similar themes and similar needs and similar demands with similar prerequisites. So it gives me hope that the tool that we have produced will be hopeful. Just a final call to say, please do take a look through the document if you haven't had a chance already. And do let us know if it has been helpful for you, or if you think that there are areas that could be strengthened. Luis and I will be on hand to help you with that, hopefully, if there's anything that we can do to support. So thank you so much again, and thank you, Jameson, for your excellent moderating. Back to you.
Thanks, Tom. Luis, would you like to close the session with some final words?
Thank you very much, Jameson. Thank you to all our excellent panelists. It's been really a very interesting conversation, and there are so many takeaways. I will be brief, and I hope that we can carry on with this conversation offline and in the days ahead. So on behalf of my colleagues at the Statistics Division that have been contributing to this work on the collaborative on data interoperability, I would like to first to express my sincere gratitude to our partners. First and foremost, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, Tom, and all this work that has been really very rich and very fruitful. When thinking of data interoperability, one of the things I would like to stress is the importance of considering this from the beginning and to listen to all these experiences by our panelists. This reconfirms the idea that thinking of interoperability is important from the beginning and not as an afterthought. And also on the impact that data interoperability considerations have on the quality of the results that we achieve, and being it a precondition to be able to collaborate, to be able to open up our information assets to bring them to where they are needed, to the policymakers. And although there has been a lot of progress, very, very important progress, there's still much to be done. Many more opportunities to extract value from data sets that are sitting still in silos. And as we are in this beginning of the decade of action, I would like to stress the opportunity to mobilize resources, as Nayara and many other colleagues mentioned. There is need to find the enablers, the financial resources, the human skills to build the capacities to continue developing and deploying data solutions that allow for better data interoperability. So that is an important piece where we need a lot of advocacy and a lot of work in mobilizing resources that allow us to do that. All of us who have been part of this process look forward to see how the interoperability guide and the interoperability maturity model is applied and further developed. And I would like to conclude by stressing once again the importance of collaboration, of reaching across organizations, across geographies, across areas of expertise. We need to continue working as a community in strengthening the foundations of data interoperability for SDG implementation across the complete data value chain, from collection to use and impact. And in the global statistical community, in the official statistical community, the work is having a huge impact already. There are avenues of work that have emerged from these conversations among the about the data interoperability, leading to work in the field of the use of administrative records for the production of official statistics, the implementation of open data policy in national statistical systems, or the integration of geospatial information and statistical information, to name just a few. So I hope that, as I said, we continue the conversation, and this is just a milestone in this path of progress that we have been seeing in the last years. Thank you, Jameson, and all our panelists, and thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.